It all began on a sweltering Saturday afternoon when I wheeled out onto my front porch and froze. A massive tow truck sat in my driveway, its engine rumbling like an angry beast. Two men in reflective vests were rolling heavy chains toward my wheelchair-accessible van, my lifeline. The sight hit me like a punch. That van isn't just a vehicle. It's how I get to my doctor's appointments, my physical therapy sessions, and even the grocery store. Without it, I'd be stranded. And there she was, Karen, the HOA president, arms crossed, sunglasses hiding eyes that were probably full of smug delight. Her voice sliced through the hot air. "This van violates community standards. We're removing it today." My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. "You can't tow that," I shouted, wheeling closer. "That van is registered as a mobility device. It's protected under the ADA." Karen's lips curled into a thin smile. "Not my problem. The rules are clear. Oversized commercial vehicles are not allowed overnight. You had your warning letters." The tow truck operator hesitated, looking between us. "Ma'am," he said, "this looks like a medical transport van." "Are you sure?" Karen cut him off like a snapping branch. "Yes, I'm sure. Hook it up. Now." Before I could even process what was happening, one of the workers crouched near the rear tires, pulling a chain under the axle. That's when panic mixed with anger inside me. I yanked out my phone and hit record. "This is illegal," I said, my voice shaking. "You'll regret this." Karen leaned in close enough that I could smell her expensive perfume. "Regret? The only thing you should regret is thinking the rules don't apply to you." My fingers trembled on the screen. I could call 911. I could call my lawyer. But deep inside, I knew something bigger was about to unfold, something that would make Karen wish she'd never set foot on my driveway. Before we continue, I told the camera, comment where you're watching from and subscribe for more Karen stories. Trust me, you're not going to believe what happens next. But that was just the beginning. When my military career ended 5 years ago, it wasn't because I wanted to leave. One late spring morning in Afghanistan, the convoy I was in hit an improvised explosive device. I woke up 3 weeks later in a military hospital, missing the use of my legs. The doctors called it a complete spinal injury. I called it a life I didn't recognize. Rehab was brutal. Learning how to transfer from bed to chair without help felt harder than any combat mission. But I made myself a promise. This wheelchair wouldn't cage me. I still had a wife who believed in me, Anna, my steady lighthouse, and a spirited 8-year-old daughter, Lucy, who thought her dad could still do anything. That promise is what brought us to Oakwood Lakes, a neat, quiet community where every house looked like it had been copied from a magazine spread. Wide sidewalks meant I could roll next to Lucy as she biked. The backyard was big enough for the vegetable garden Anna dreamed about. It was supposed to be our fresh start. The first weeks were peaceful. Neighbors waved. Kids played basketball in the cul-de-sac. Then Karen introduced herself. She arrived, unannounced, striding across our lawn as if it belonged to her. Blonde bob, crisp white blouse, clipboard in hand. She looked like she'd stepped out of a real estate brochure. "Welcome to Oakwood Lakes," she said, her smile thin as fishing line. "I'm Karen Whitmore, HOA President. We run a tight ship here. Rules keep our property values high." Her eyes flicked to the driveway, where my wheelchair-accessible van sat gleaming in the sun. It wasn't flashy, just a tall silver van with a side ramp and medical plates. But Karen's gaze lingered like it was a crime scene. "Large commercial vehicles aren't typically permitted," she said, tapping her clipboard. "You'll need to submit a variance request." I explained calmly that the van wasn't commercial, it was a mobility device protected under federal law. Her smile never faltered, but something colder slipped behind her eyes. "We'll see what the board says," she replied before turning on her heel. That was the first hint of trouble. Soon letters started arriving, polite at first. Friendly reminder: all driveways must remain aesthetically consistent with community standards. Then harsher: final notice: remove non-compliant vehicle or face fines of $100 per day. Each time I called the HOA office, an assistant promised to review the matter, but nothing changed. When I asked for a board meeting to explain my case, Karen scheduled it for a weekday morning when she knew I'd be at therapy. Anna tried to stay hopeful. Maybe she just doesn't understand, she said while we packed Lucy's lunch one night. Once she hears how critical the van is, I shook my head. Karen understands. She just doesn't care. Still, I kept my cool. I filed the variance request she demanded. I printed federal ADA guidelines. I even attached letters from my doctor. Weeks passed with no response. Then came the first fine, a bright orange slip on my door, like a scarlet letter, $500. I remember Lucy finding it before I did. "Daddy, why is there a ticket on the door?" she asked, eyes wide. "Did we do something bad?" I forced a smile I didn't feel. "No, sweetheart, we didn't do anything wrong." Inside, though, something dark was brewing. Every veteran knows when a skirmish is about to turn into a full-blown battle. I tried diplomacy one last time, wheeling over to Karen's house. The smell of fresh mulch and expensive roses hit me before I rang the bell. She opened the door with that same picture-perfect smile. "Mr. Hayes," she said, feigning surprise. "To what do I owe the visit?" "Karen, these fines are illegal. The ADA protects my right to keep that van. I'm asking you to stop." She leaned against the frame, arms crossed. "Rules are rules," she said lightly. "If we make exceptions for you, we'll have boats and RVs everywhere. Maybe this neighborhood isn't a good fit." The door clicked shut before I could answer. Walking, or rather wheeling, home that day, I knew this wasn't just about a van. It was about control. Karen saw my wheelchair and thought easy target, but she was about to learn that soldiers don't back down. Still, I didn't expect her next move, and when it came, it would push everything past the point of no return. But that was just the beginning. Karen didn't waste any time turning her rules are rules threat into action. The very next week, I woke to a new violation notice stuck to our door like a neon insult. This time the fine was $1,000. My stomach knotted, but the paper wasn't the worst part. It was the note Karen scrawled at the bottom. "This will continue until the vehicle is removed. Karen W., HOA President." That single signature told me everything. This wasn't a board decision. This was personal. I called the HOA office immediately. A receptionist with a bright, rehearsed voice answered. "Good morning, Oakwood Lakes Homeowners Association. How may I help you?" "This is Daniel Hayes," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I need to speak to Karen Whitmore. Right now." A pause. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hayes. She's unavailable. I can take a message." "This is regarding an illegal fine. I have ADA documentation. Put me through." Another pause. "I'll let her know." But of course, Karen never called back. Over the next 2 weeks, the letters multiplied. Orange, yellow, even red notices like she was testing out a rainbow of harassment. Neighbors started whispering. I'd catch curtains twitching as I rolled past. Some nodded sympathetically, others avoided my eyes. Karen's influence ran deep. Then came the petty sabotage. One morning, the sidewalk ramp to my driveway was blocked by heavy planter pots, the same color as Karen's porch decor. Another time, the security camera over my garage mysteriously stopped working, wires cut clean. Anna tried to comfort me, but even she was starting to break. "Maybe we should park the van at your brother's place for a while," she whispered late one night. I felt a flash of anger, not at her, but at the thought. "That's exactly what she wants," I said. "If we give in now, she'll never stop." Lucy overheard more than I wished. One evening, she climbed onto my lap, her little arms wrapping around me. "Daddy, is the lady next door mad at us?" she asked softly. "Did we do something bad?" My throat tightened. "No, sweetheart," I said, hugging her back. "Sometimes people just don't like what they don't understand. But we didn't do anything wrong." She nodded, brave like her mom, but I saw the worry in her eyes. It lit a new fire in me. I wasn't just fighting for my rights. I was fighting so my daughter would learn never to let a bully win. Then Karen escalated from letters and sabotage to full-on public humiliation. One Saturday morning, as neighbors strolled to the community playground, She set up a folding table at the end of her driveway with a sign, "Stop the eyesore. Sign the petition to remove commercial vehicles." I wheeled over, my heart pounding. "Karen, this is harassment. You know this van is a mobility device." She smiled sweetly, like a cat with a cornered mouse. "It's a safety issue, Daniel. Your van blocks sight lines. We must protect the children." A few neighbors shifted uncomfortably, but no one challenged her. "You'll regret this," I said, voice low. "The only thing I'll regret," she replied, "is not acting sooner." I turned and rolled back home, blood roaring in my ears. Karen's laughter followed me like a bad smell. At this point, I knew simple complaints wouldn't work. I started documenting everything, every letter, every planter pot, every cut wire, photograph dated, and saved to a secure cloud folder. I also contacted a disability rights lawyer who confirmed what I already knew. The Americans with Disabilities Act was on my side. "She's banking on intimidation," he said over the phone. "Keep records. If she moves to tow the van, that's a major violation." I felt a small measure of relief until the next night. It was just after midnight when a deep metallic clang jolted me awake. Anna gasped beside me. I grabbed my phone and rolled to the window. A shadowy figure darted across the driveway, too tall and confident to be a random trespasser. By the time I reached the porch light switch, the figure was gone. But my van's side mirror hung at an odd angle smashed. Anna came up behind me, pale in the moonlight. "Daniel, was that?" "Karen's running out of patience," I said grimly. We filed a police report, but without clear video, it was only a suspicious activity note. Another dead end. I thought I'd reached peak stress. Then came the final notice. Bright red, thicker paper, nailed to our door like a war declaration. "As of Saturday, your non-compliant vehicle will be removed at owner's expense. This action is authorized by the Oakwood Lakes HOA bylaws. President Karen Whitmore." Anna's hands shook as she read it. "They can't do that. Can they?" I met her eyes. "Not legally. But Karen doesn't care about legal." That Friday night, I barely slept. I kept replaying every possible response, calling 911, chaining the van to a tree, even camping inside it. But something told me Karen had already set her plan in motion. Saturday dawned heavy and humid. By mid-morning, the low growl of a tow truck engine rolled through the neighborhood like a war drum. Lucy peeked through the curtains and whispered, "Daddy, there's a big truck outside." I wheeled to the porch, and there it was, idling in our driveway, chrome flashing under the sun. Karen stood beside it, sunglasses hiding her eyes, a satisfied smirk on her face. This was it, the battle she'd been pushing for all along. But she had no idea what was about to happen next. And that was just the beginning. The tow truck's diesel engine rumbled like thunder across the cul-de-sac. Chains clinked as one of the workers crouched near the back wheels of my wheelchair van. The July sun blazed down, but a chill crawled up my spine. I rolled forward, heart pounding. "Stop. This van is a mobility device. It's protected under the ADA. You can't touch it without a court order." The taller tow driver hesitated, glancing at his partner. "Ma'am," he said to Karen, "if this is a handicap van, we could get fined." Karen cut him off like a whip crack. "The HOA has full authority. We've documented every violation. Hook it up." Her sunglasses hid her eyes, but I could hear the smile in her voice. This wasn't about rules anymore. It was about power. I quickly dialed 911 and hit speakerphone. "This is Daniel Hayes. I'm a disabled veteran. The HOA President is trying to tow my wheelchair-accessible van in violation of the ADA. The dispatcher's calm voice steadied me. "Stay on the line. Officers are en route." Karen laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "You really think the police will side with you over the community rules? You've ignored months of notices. Today the board wins." Anna stepped outside, voice trembling but firm. "Karen, this is cruel. You know Daniel depends on that van." Karen turned her attention to my wife with a sneer. "Maybe if you people respected the neighborhood, we wouldn't have to enforce the law." Neighbors had gathered along the sidewalks, murmuring. Some held coffee mugs, Others crossed their arms, unsure whether to intervene or enjoy the drama. But no one stepped forward. The tow driver shifted uncomfortably. "Ma'am, maybe we should wait until the cops." "No," Karen barked. "Now, hook it up." And with that, the worker slid the heavy hook under the rear axle. The metallic scrape echoed in my chest like a drumbeat of defeat. Inside, I was boiling. I'd survived enemy fire overseas, but I'd never felt this particular kind of helplessness watching someone dismantle my independence while pretending it was for the community. I remembered the smashed mirror from a few nights ago, the mystery figure, the cut camera wire. All of it pointed in one direction, and she was standing right in front of me. I raised my phone, still recording. "Karen, you are violating federal law. This video is evidence for my attorney and the ADA compliance office." She tilted her head and smirked. "Sue if you want. By the time any judge hears your case, that van will be long gone." The audacity took my breath away. It was as if she believed she was untouchable, backed by the HOA, shielded by the system. And for a terrifying moment, it felt like she might be right. 10 long minutes passed. The tow truck driver climbed into his cab and started to lift the van. The hydraulics hissed. My stomach knotted. Lucy pressed her face to Anna's side, whispering through tears, "Daddy, they're taking your van. How will we go places?" That broke something in me. I reached for Anna's hand and whispered, "Stay calm. Help is on the way." But even as I said it, I wondered if help would come in time. The wail of a police siren finally cut through the heavy air. 2 squad cars rolled into the street, lights flashing red and blue. Relief and fear collided inside me. Would they actually stop this, or would they side with the HOA president? The first officer, a broad-shouldered man with a calm face, stepped out. "What's going on here?" Karen pounced on the question. "Officer, thank goodness. This resident has ignored multiple HOA violations. We have the right to remove his commercial vehicle under our bylaws." I wheeled forward, holding up my phone. "This is a wheelchair-accessible van. It's registered under the Americans with Disabilities Act. I showed her the documents months ago. She's ignoring federal law." The officer turned to Karen. "Ma'am, did you receive this documentation?" She hesitated just long enough to give herself away. "He claims he sent something, but our board never approved. Federal law doesn't require board approval," the officer interrupted. "If this is an ADA-protected vehicle, you cannot tow it." A ripple of murmurs moved through the watching neighbors. Karen's jaw tightened. "But the HOA, the officer said firmly, is not above federal law." For a heartbeat, I thought justice had finally arrived. But Karen wasn't finished. She whipped out a manila folder and shoved it at the officer. "Here are the violation notices. Multiple neighbors have complained that the van blocks the view of oncoming traffic. This is a safety hazard. We have an obligation to act." The officer thumbed through the papers, frowning slightly. "We'll need to verify the traffic obstruction claim," he said. "If it's an immediate danger, the city might have authority." My heart sank. Karen was twisting the truth into a new weapon. And for a moment, it worked. The tow truck engine revved again. Inside my head, a soldier's instinct clicked on. I'd been ambushed before, and I knew when to call for reinforcements. I took a deep breath and sent a quick text message to a private group labeled Bravo Family. It was the code name for a handful of brothers in arms, Army friends who lived within driving distance and had never let me down. We'd trained to respond at a moment's notice. They always said, "If you ever need backup, just drop the word." This was that moment. "Need you now. HOA emergency. Karen tow. Coordinates attached." Then I looked Karen straight in the eye and said quietly enough that only she and Anna could hear, "You just made the worst mistake of your life." She smirked, certain she'd already won. But she had no idea what kind of help was about to arrive, and that was only the calm before the storm. The first sound that reached my ears was the unmistakable roar of engines, loud, powerful, and closing in fast. The air around us seemed to crackle with anticipation as I glanced over at Karen. Her smug expression faltered for just a second. I didn't need to look at my phone to know that my army brothers were here. They'd heard the call and responded faster than I could have hoped. From around the corner, a black SUV came into view, followed by a military Humvee that rumbled like thunder. The convoy parked across the street, blocking the driveway. A dozen men in military fatigues piled out, each one tall, broad-shouldered, and moving with purpose. My heart raced, not from fear, but from a strange, fierce hope. These were the same men who had fought beside me when things got tough. And now they were standing by me again. One of them, Sergeant Williams, marched up the driveway toward us. He was the first to speak. "What's the situation, Hayes?" I pointed to Karen and the tow truck, still idling with its hook raised. "They're trying to tow my van. She's using HOA power to ignore federal law." Sergeant Williams nodded sharply. "Not on my watch." He turned to the tow driver. "Shut down now, or we'll have a problem." The tow driver blinked, uncertain. Are you military?" he asked, backing away from the van. "Yes, he is," I said, keeping my voice steady. "And you've made a mistake. You're about to break federal law. The ADA protects that van, and it's not going anywhere unless you want this to escalate." Karen's face turned from confident to flushed with panic. "You can't do this," she snapped, her hands trembling slightly. "This is private property. This is HOA business." But the soldiers were unmoved. Sergeant Williams turned to the officer who had been questioning Karen. "Sir, we're all veterans here and we know the law. This man has served, and that van is protected. We'll be happy to discuss this further with your superiors if needed." The officer took a long look at the assembled soldiers. Then he nodded slowly. "All right, we'll hold off. There's clearly more to this situation than I was aware of." Karen stood there, fuming, as the tow truck driver reluctantly released the chains and lowered the lift. It felt like the world had just shifted in our favor. But it wasn't over yet. As the convoy of military vehicles began to pull away, I wheeled up to Karen, my voice calm but firm. "You can't intimidate people into submission, and you definitely can't bully a disabled vet." She took a step back, staring at me as though I was the one who had broken the rules. "You haven't heard the last of this. The HOA won't forget this," she spat. "You'll regret this." I smiled to myself. "I think you've already made that mistake, Karen." Just then, Anna joined me, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Lucy peeked out from behind the door, her face lighting up when she saw the van still in the driveway. "We're not going anywhere, kiddo," I said, pulling her into my lap, "thanks to some old friends." As the sun set behind us, the battle was over, but the victory felt sweeter than I could have ever imagined. Karen's plans had backfired, and I knew there was nothing she could do to undo what had just happened. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. It was time to make the final call to my lawyer. Karen would face consequences for her actions, and the HOA would have to deal with the consequences of letting her run roughshod over their rules. But I wasn't worried. We'd won this round, and this fight, it had only just begun. And that was the moment Karen realized her mistake. But she still didn't know what was coming next. For the next few days, Karen kept her distance, though I could feel the storm brewing. She was planning her retaliation, but the tide had already turned, and I was ready for it. The first sign that things had shifted came when I received an email from the HOA. It was a formal invitation to a special meeting, the subject line, "Emergency hearing, complaint against Daniel Hayes' vehicle." I glanced at the time and place. The meeting was scheduled for Wednesday at 6 p.m., and it would be conducted in front of the HOA board. At first, I was confused. Was this another attempt to intimidate me? I reached out to my lawyer, who confirmed the obvious. The HOA couldn't force me to remove the van, especially after what had happened with Karen's blatant violation of federal law. The meeting was, in fact, a last-ditch attempt to cover up her mistakes. I didn't hesitate. I called my Army brothers again. This time, we weren't coming for a confrontation. We were coming to expose Karen's corruption for everyone to see. By the time I arrived at the HOA meeting, I wasn't alone. I wheeled into the community hall with Sergeant Williams at my side, followed by 3 more veterans and even my lawyer. The room fell silent as we entered. I could feel every pair of eyes on me. Karen stood at the front, flanked by the HOA board members, all of them looking uncomfortable as the veterans filed into the room. The air was thick with tension, but I didn't flinch. The moment I spoke, everyone in the room went still. "Thank you for inviting me to this meeting," I began, keeping my voice steady, "but I think it's time we finally address what's been happening behind closed doors." I glanced at the board members, some of whom were already shifting uncomfortably in their chairs. Karen Whitmore has abused her position as HOA President. She's repeatedly violated federal law by attempting to remove my ADA-protected wheelchair van, and I have the documentation to prove it. I handed out copies of the ADA guidelines, the emails from my lawyer, and a detailed timeline of events that prove Karen had been harassing me for months. The room was silent as they absorbed the information. But Karen didn't back down. Her eyes narrowed with defiance. "This is a personal attack. The HOA has every right to enforce its bylaws. I am simply following procedure." "You're using the bylaws as a weapon," my lawyer said calmly, stepping forward. "And you're doing it because you think your power protects you from law. But now, Karen, the law is watching." The board was divided. Some members were obviously uncomfortable, but Karen had made sure to surround herself with those loyal to her cause. They looked to her for guidance, but even they couldn't ignore the weight of the evidence in front of them. Then came the bombshell. The town mayor, who had been silent through most of the meeting, cleared his throat and spoke up. "It seems we've overlooked something here. We've received complaints from multiple residents about Karen's actions. We've also seen a report from the police about her attempts to forcefully tow a legally protected vehicle. Frankly, this is unacceptable." The room shifted again. This time, Karen was the one on the defensive. "What are you saying?" she demanded. "Are you accusing me of something?" The mayor didn't mince words. "I'm saying that your actions have harmed the community and jeopardized the reputation of this HOA. And I believe it's time for the board to take a vote on whether you should remain in your position." It was a moment of reckoning. For the first time, Karen's mask slipped. Her confidence faltered as the board members began whispering among themselves. One by one, they cast their votes. When the final count came in, Karen lost. The room erupted into murmurs. Karen stood frozen, her mouth open in disbelief. The mayor turned to her and spoke one last time. "Karen Whitmore, your actions as HOA president have been deemed unacceptable. Effective immediately, you are removed from your position." She sputtered in protest, but it was too late. The vote was final. I wheeled over to her, my heart pounding with satisfaction. "You'll have plenty of time to reflect on your actions," I said softly. "I hope you've learned what happens when you bully people into submission." Her eyes were wide with rage, but she couldn't speak. The truth had caught up with her. As I rolled out of the room, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of relief. Karen's reign of terror had ended, and the community was finally free from her influence. Outside, I found Anna and Lucy waiting for me. Lucy was jumping up and down, her face lit up with excitement. "Daddy, you did it. You beat the bully." I smiled and pulled her into my lap, kissing the top of her head. "We did it, kiddo. We stuck together and we won." Anna smiled, too, her eyes filled with pride. "I knew you'd never back down." As we made our way home, the weight of the battle finally lifted. For the first time in months, I felt truly free. And I knew that the fight wasn't just about the van anymore. It was about standing up for what's right, no matter the odds. And Karen? She learned the hard way that bullies never win. But the real victory was the one we'd earned together. As we pulled into the driveway, the weight of everything that had happened finally began to sink in. It was over. Karen had lost and we had won. But more than that, we had shown the neighborhood that standing up to injustice mattered. We had proved that even in the face of overwhelming odds, there was always a way to make things right. That evening, as the sun set and the sky turned a soft orange, I sat on the porch with Anna and Lucy. The house was quiet, the kind of peaceful silence that comes after a long battle. I looked at the van in the driveway, still there, still ours, For the first time in months, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I wasn't fighting a battle anymore. I was home. Anna looked over at me, her eyes soft with pride. I don't know how you did it. I was scared at times, but you kept pushing forward. I smiled and pulled her closer. I didn't do it alone. We had the right people behind us, and more than that, we had the truth. Lucy sat beside me, leaning against my arm. Are we safe now, Daddy? Yes, sweetheart. We're safe now. I kissed the top of her head. And that's the most important thing. No one can take our peace away, no matter how hard they try. The following week, Karen packed up her office at the HOA and left the neighborhood for good. Her fall from grace was swift, but the ripple effects were even more powerful. The board members who had supported her started facing questions of their own, and some even resigned in the wake of the scandal. The whole neighborhood changed after that. What had once been a community divided by fear and manipulation was now a place of unity. People who had been afraid to stand up before began to find their voices. And the HOA? They learned the hard way that abuse of power doesn't go unnoticed. A few weeks later, I was sitting on my porch again, this time with a few neighbors who had come by to express their support. One of them, a woman named Rachel, smiled at me. I didn't know who you were at first, Daniel, but I've been watching what you did, and I want you to know something. What you did wasn't just for you. It was for all of us. Her words stuck with me. For the first time, I realized that this wasn't just my fight. It was a fight for everyone who had ever been silenced, for everyone who had ever been made to feel powerless. And that was the lesson I took away from it all. When you stand up for what's right, you not only fight for yourself, you fight for the people around you. You fight for the people who can't fight, for themselves. And most importantly, you show the world that no one is above the law. As the wind picked up, I glanced at the stars beginning to twinkle in the darkening sky. In that moment, I knew that no matter what the future held, we'd face it together, as a family, as a community. Because the truth always comes out, and the ones who fight for justice are the ones who win in the end. And that is how we beat the bully and found the strength to keep moving forward. Never underestimate the power of standing up for what's right. No matter how big or small, justice always finds a way, and when we come together, we can overcome even the most impossible odds.